It's so good to see some of my favorite people back again. It really feels great. And we are all set to begin. My name is Mary Koza. Most of you know me in this room and online. Welcome everyone online. And I'm the Director of Education here, and am really thrilled to be able to run this little book club, which the term is very loosely used here. It started as a docent initiative when a lovely docent named Jane Roubaix decided that we should, or suggested that we should read the books read by Birchfield. And we started by doing so, but we quickly shifted to align our book selection with the mission of this center, which is to promote the incredible talent that is right here in our own community. It's very exciting to have tonight's guest, who I will not name. I'm going to allow my friend Cheryl to do the honors of that. Back again, the last time we had her was during COVID, so we had an opportunity to meet her in person tonight, and you all have a chance to meet her, and those of you online have a chance to see her. So thank you, everyone, and I'm turning it over to my friend Cheryl, who is going to facilitate tonight's book club. So thank you, Cheryl.
Well, we extend a warm welcome to you, Susan Lynn Solomon. She's the author of tonight's book, Raising Kane, and she's a former entertainment attorney who's currently the facilitator of the Writers' Critique Group that is co-sponsored by the Buffalo Central Library and Just Buffalo Literary Center. Ms. Solomon is the author of short stories that have appeared in numerous literary journals, and as well a number of books, including Raising Kane, tonight's book, as well as another of my favorites, Abigail's Window, and others that are over there for your review and potential purchase. Ms. Solomon's writing has earned her a number of awards. She was a finalist for the 2016 Book Excellence Award, a finalist for the 2017 McGrath House Indie Book of the Year, and the 2018 Book Excellence Award, and won I don't know if you win it, you were awarded first place in the 2019 Chanticleer International Book Award Mystery and Mayhem category. So again, we welcome.
Thank you. You heard some of my background, and I think, in any book that an author does, she's going to wind up in there one way or another. In Raising Kane, which also was a finalist for the Book Excellence Award, just last year, the end of last year, Alicia Kane, who is the subject of the book, hello, Alicia Kane. She was an art major at Pratt Institute. I was an art major in high school. I made Pratt as an art major, and my mother pulled me aside and said, "Oh no daughter of mine is going to be an artist living in Greenwich Village in a 3-story walk-up with hot and cold running roaches." So they weren't going to pay for my college if I did that. So I did liberal arts, especially in writing. But while I was at Pratt, this was during the 60s, the late 60s, the Vietnam War, the protest era, and there was a riot at Pratt, and somebody started it. I didn't get tossed out. I did get to march, as Alicia did, with Dr. King and Selma. I met the man I still call St. Martin. After college, Alicia wound up, because she was also a musician, playing guitar in Greenwich Village, doing folk music. She joined a band and wound up writing the music for them. Her band became superstars. This is where we separate a little bit, because my band didn't, but I can dream.
Yeah.
I will say that what happened to Alicia, if you read the book, you'll see it. What happened to her in Chicago happened. I will leave you with that. The book is really contemporary fiction. Much of what I write are mysteries. And my narrator, Libby Bridgman, would like what happens with Alicia to be a mystery. It isn't. Well, it really is a mystery in a large sense, because what the book is about is finding family and learning what family really is. And the tagline, of course, for the book is Secrets and Lies. Is this what a family is made of? Anyway, this is because there is so much of me in this book. This is one of my favorites, and one that I absolutely enjoy writing. Forgive me, I have to put on my reading glasses instead of my seeing glasses because I'm not smart enough to wear bifocals. I walk into walls, I fall downstairs. No, safer this way. At any rate, the book is about really two families, Libby Bridgman's family and, at the end of the day, Alicia Kane's family, and how they wind up coming together at one point. At any rate, Libby is a stringer, a cub reporter for the Village Voice. If you know what the Village Voice is, it's a local newspaper weekly downstate. Chapter 1, Tedium of a Stringer's Life. A Brooklyn jury was primed to decide if a woman who drove her car into a group protesting the police killings of George Floyd is guilty of attempted murder. I should have been in that courtroom, my pen and pad poised when the foreman handed the verdict to the judge. Regardless of the outcome, the decision would be news, maybe get my byline in papers across the country. I wanted to be in that Brooklyn courtroom. Damn it, I wasn't. After bouncing from job to job, changing careers twice, and at last settling into one reporting for a local newspaper, I had gotten a call from the editor of the Village Voice. I hadn't sent him my resume, yet with no preamble, he'd offered me a job. That's why when the editor instructed me to forget Brooklyn and catch a flight to Niagara Falls to interview a singer who hadn't been heard from in 40 years, I couldn't argue. At least not much. And, come on, Max. Where's the relevance of that kind of story? I told him. In a gruff voice, Max Howard said, not that I have to explain, Bridgman, but I'm planning a retrospective on the late 60s and 70s. I want a piece on Alicia Kane. The woman was a big part of that era, a lioness who couldn't be tamed. Did he really think my imagination would be titillated? I told him, well, maybe I should bring something soft for her to gnaw on. That lioness must be toothless by now. Then I sighed. Why me, Max? I wasn't born in the 70s. What could I bring to a story about her? A fresh perspective, he said, with a distracted abruptness I'd found to be typical of men in the news profession. When I hesitated, he said, just do it. And the line went dead. Staring at my phone, I muttered, editors. Max Howard was in his early 40s, only 6 years older than I. Why did he try so hard to sound like Ed Asner in Mary Tyler Moore Show reruns? I tossed my telephone onto my bed. I didn't yet have a workplace at The Voice, so I did my writing in my bedroom. Grumbling, I cleared the makeup off my small desk, pulled a notepad from a drawer, and logged onto the internet to see what background I could find about Alicia Kane. Google informed me that she had been born in September 1948, had been an art major at Pratt Institute, and had a few paintings exhibited at some gallery in Soho. The website included a brief critique of her work. In the short time I worked as a reporter, I learned that even the smallest street could open into a wide avenue. So I made a note of the gallery address, then clicked my mouse on another link. The second site had a synopsis of her recording career. It listed the albums her group, Raising Kane, turned out between 1970 and 1980, along with the chart positions of a dozen singles, all of them years out of print. After that, nothing, a dead end. This assignment felt ridiculous. What could Max Howard be thinking? Okay, the woman had been a rock star, but the 70s was about more than rock and roll. In the Times online archive, I found an article about a 1968 student riot at Pratt. No mention of Kane. Max isn't stupid, I thought. There has to be something more. As I struggled into a pair of tight jeans and pulled a sweatshirt over my pajama top. I knew of a vintage record shop a block from my apartment. Maybe her music would tell me something. A lioness of the 60s and 70s, I said with a sardonic laugh as I sat before my makeup mirror. I have a habit of thinking out loud. In fact, sometimes words fall from my mouth before I realize they're in my brain. This can be embarrassing. Not ladylike, my mother often told me. While in my mind I listened to my mother chastise me for this untoward trait, I had another idea. Ira. I picked up my phone and punched in the number of a friend who worked at a collection agency. Phone, gas, electric bills, charge accounts, speeding tickets, arrests, even most birth records. Every bit of a person's life seemed to be logged in some computer database. My friend had access to those. After a few minutes on hold, listening to Latin music, he came on the line. Ira, I said, what do you want now? Do I have to want something to call an old high school pal? You always want something, he said. I give, you take, and I don't hear from you again until you want something else. I sighed. This was definitely not one of my better days handling men. No surprise. I've never handled them very well. I tried again. I just thought maybe you could find me a little background on. Giving you a little background could get me fired. Ira, don't be this way, I said in my most helpless voice I could muster. I don't need anything as deep as last time. No bank records. I'm really stuck for a place to start on my new assignment. You're the only one I can turn to. I heard him rumble something undistinguishable. Before he could turn me down, I explained about Alicia Kane and the dead end I had run up against. Give me anything, please, I begged. You really take the cake, you know that? I was wearing him down. Pretty please? I'll let you take me to dinner Saturday. Again, Ira grumbled, but I heard the clicking of his fingers on his keyboard. When he spoke again, he told me he didn't find much in his database. Just a few things, he said. She's living in Niagara Falls and she pays her bills on time. Oh, and there's this. She got arrested in March 1968 during a student riot at Pratt Institute. Not much to go on, but at least I had something to look for in her music. Thanks, Ira, I said. You're a doll. Yeah, I am. And Saturday, you're buying dinner. That afternoon, I called Max and announced that I didn't have to go to Niagara Falls. I had Kane's birth record and everything she'd done. I'd already written most of the story. The few bits needed to flesh it out could be gotten if I talked to her on the phone. He cut me short. I'm not looking for a resume, Bridgman. She's expecting you, so get your ass on the plane and bring one back for me. Frustrated, I asked, what's she going to tell me that I don't already know? Do I have to think everything out for you? He said. Okay, here's the angle. Activist makes her name for herself in the cause of public justice, parlays that into stardom, then suddenly quits. What's the connection? How would I know? I said. Put a political editor on the story if that's what you want. Why do I have to do this? Because I'm the boss and I said so. I thought about calling him back, but from his tone and the way he slammed down the phone. The next morning I got on a puddle jumper, rented a car at the Buffalo airport, and drove through the slushy remains of a late March snow to find Alicia Kane. I figured that it would be a quick interview. just long enough to give me 1,000 words with which to satisfy a cranky editor. The interview goes for a number of pages. What I find interesting is that every time Libby asks Alicia about raising Kane, which is really where she wants to go, Alicia cuts her off. Doesn't want to get involved with that, doesn't want to talk about it. And Libby keeps wondering why. They have a long and philosophical conversation that goes with, deals with a lot of, at Pratt Institute, there was a bar, Eric's Pub, and we all used to go there. And that's where we radicals met. And we would plot out all the damage we were going to do to the world. And a lot of what Alicia tells her is what they discussed there and how the riot was plotted. Alicia doesn't at that point tell her that she was the one that started it. Libby finds that out later when she is interviewing a friend. At the end of the interview, where was it? When the time came to leave, I felt as though I'd returned from a time machine journey. Though I hadn't learned why she left the band, scattered impressions were beginning to merge into a unified whole from which my story would grow. I had to give that devil Max Howard his due. I'd become intrigued by the woman's ability to define her world, a place sometimes blinkered behind rose-colored glasses, often populated by demons, but always reacted to as she saw it. I had caught a brief glimpse of the Alicia Kane that once was, yet I knew I'd only scratched the surface. May I come back and talk with you again, I asked. She didn't answer. At her front door, she again seemed to inspect me. When you got here, you resented having to come. She held up a hand to stop my denial. I could see it in you. You wondered why anyone would care to read about an old woman who hasn't done anything in years. Again, she brushed the hair from my face. You're so young, Libby. I was too once. Back then, I believed only today mattered. In time, you'll learn. Yesterday, ours, everyone else's, is always with us. It never goes away. It shapes who we are and everything we do. I glanced up, puzzled and vaguely disappointed. It sounds like you're telling me that no matter what we do, we can't change anything. Alicia gripped my wrist. That isn't what I said. Anything we do or don't do changes everything. Anything we do or don't do. It alters the future. What I meant is that all my todays are always with me. And not just with me, with you too. She stared over my shoulder as if she could see all the days making up her life. Uncertain how to react, I said nothing. Yes, she said, as if answering some question of her own. You could have refused this assignment. It would have been hard, but you could have. Her grip tightened on my wrist. I need you to understand. I felt as though she were apologizing to me. For what? Dragging me up here? She hadn't. Max Howard might have sent anyone. Smiling at my obvious confusion, she released my wrist. Maybe the first lesson in everything we talked about today is that wanting to be something to be true, passionately needing it, demanding it, doesn't make it so. Reality is the only authority. I used to keep a list of things I wanted. Don't laugh, I really did. Dreams becoming possible, love that goes on forever, really knowing my children before it got too late. Those things were on my list. She drifted again into a private recollection. This was the most revealing thing she'd told me, and she'd saved it until I didn't have time to delve into it. When she returned from her reverie, the window was again shuttered. You asked whether you could come back. I'd like that. But before you do, she hesitated. Do something for me. You're good at research. Look up something. The butterfly effect. Learn what happens when butterfly flaps its wing in China. With a brief wave, Alicia turned and closed her door. When I got into the rental car, I sat thinking, did Alicia think I didn't know about the butterfly effect? Maybe that's a clue as to why she walked away from everything. Libby is now back at her apartment. My bedroom in the Brooklyn Heights apartment where I had grown up felt as though it had gotten smaller over the years. It had the same single bed I'd slept in since I outgrew a crib and the same laminated wood dresser that never had enough space for my clothes. The only differences were that now it had ivory instead of pink walls, and its space was cramped by the secondhand desk I had bought when I returned from college. I was sitting there arranging the Kane interview notes when Max Howard phoned. A detective from the Niagara Falls Police Department wanted to talk to me, he said, and gave me the phone number. Talking with the police, asking questions could be part of my job. But a cop calling me? Did he say what he wants? Has something to do with Alicia Kane, Max said. What about Alicia? The phone tucked under my chin, I poured the contents of my handbag onto my bed. Had I accidentally taken some trinket of hers? Don't know. Call Niagara Falls and find out. Max hung up. Worrying about what I might have done got me nowhere. I pushed the button for the number Max gave me. After a short delay, a dull official voice came on the line. I identified myself, then said, "You want to speak with me? Miss Bridgman?" Yeah, I do. I waited for him to tell me why. After a few seconds, he said, "I've got a deceased lady up here, name of Alicia." The crackle of paper over the telephone line indicated he was looking through a file. "Lawrence. A neighbor said someone from the Village Voice was with Miss Lawrence the last time anyone saw her. Your boss said that was you." Lawrence. I mentally paged through what I knew about Alicia Kane until I recalled an item. Lawrence had been her married name. Then I realized what the detective had said. "Alicia's dead?" I gasped. "How? Did someone kill her?" Why had I jumped to that conclusion? Had I heard her say something? "Doesn't look suspicious," the detective said. "Doors, windows locked. Blood alcohol level indicates she'd been drinking. Barbiturates in her system. Might be suicide. No note, though, so it might be an accident. That's what we'll call it, unless you got more information, which is why I'm speaking with you, ma'am. You spent a considerable time with Miss Lawrence on the 21st of April. Back to my original thought, I asked, isn't it possible somebody got into her house and... No, ma'am. Right now, all indications are she did it to herself, just trying to learn whether it was on purpose. It sounded as though he took a drink of something. Now, the day of the 21st, he let the question hang. Gathering my thoughts, I took a deep breath. I spent most of the day with her. Did she seem angry, distracted, concerned about anything in particular? My stomach twisted. I had just met Alicia, yet something about her. No, my job was to report what happened, not let myself be part of it. Forcing my mind back to the detective's question, I said, nothing like that. Miss Kane, Lawrence was alert, opinionated, and very energetic. Enthusiastic might be the best word. He went on like he was reading a form. Did she say anything to you about someone or something bothering her? She didn't, I said. Or, well, yes, but nothing personal, just politics. It was an interview, detective. We talked about a lot of things. What things? Oh, her life, people she'd known, what she thought was wrong with the world. She didn't sound depressed. In fact, when she invited me back, She gave no indication she planned anything in the nature of subsequent events? Definitely not. I guess we'll never know what really happened, he said. Drunk and confused or drunk and depressed, nothing to be done about it either way. Thanks for your help. When I didn't again suggest that someone from her past might have knocked on her door, then knocked her off, he hung up. It seemed to me that he just wanted to write something for the file, close it and move on, as I had intended to do once I wrote my story about Alicia. Now I knew that wouldn't happen. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what the detective told me. It couldn't have been an accident. Alicia Kane didn't strike me as careless. And suicide? Ridiculous. A woman who's planning that doesn't invite a reporter to come back. So it had to be something else. Something else the detective had suggested. If Alicia suspected she might be in danger, would she have told me? Not outright, maybe, but there were other ways. When I glanced in my makeup mirror, I saw a smug smile on my lips. The possibility that a small city police force intended to ignore a murder was something a stringer could cut her molars on, something that could get her a full-time reporter's job. I picked up the recorder from my desk. Alicia Kane's last words might be on it. If I listened carefully as much to what she didn't say as what she did, I might hear a clue as to who killed her. When well after midnight, I at last heard the end of the interview, the memory of something I hadn't recorded came to mind. She asked me to find out about the butterfly effect. The request related to nothing she'd said before. Could it have been a hint that she feared someone in her past? From the subtle way her mind seemed to work, it seemed possible. I couldn't wait to tell Max Howard what I suspected. First thing in the morning, I telephoned Max and told him what the detective said. Before I could speak of my suspicion, he assigned me the chore of writing Alicia Kane's obituary. Keep it on the short side, maybe a single column, he instructed. As for the full story, I'm not sure it's going to work now. After a moment, though, completely out of character, he added, make the obit good, Libby. Kane deserves that. Excuse me. I intended to balk. With a real story about Alicia Kane's death hanging in the air, Max reduced me to writing nothing more than an obituary? The catch in his voice stopped me short. I couldn't argue with a man who sounded close to tears. My empathy lasted only until I hung up. Staring at myself in the mirror, I almost laughed at the idea of Max Howard crying. I felt certain the man had no tear ducts. That thought led me to another. When I met her, Alicia had referred to him as Max. Could that mean the son of a bitch knew her? I picked up the phone to call him back, but stopped before I punched in the last number. Alicia was dead. Pressing Max about knowing her wouldn't change that. On the next 2 days, I listened several times to the recorded interview, pulling an event she described from here, a few words from there, and all the time straining my ears for some suggestion Alicia might have feared she'd die. None of us can run from the past, Libby. Her voice, so vibrant in life, sounded tinny when it came through my recorder's small speaker. I always felt my life had to mean something, she'd said. What about yours? Do you have the courage to make yours mean something? Her challenge didn't make me bristle when I heard it now. It just left me determined to answer the question rattling in my brain since I'd spoken to the detective. I didn't dare alert whoever might be to blame by hinting at my suspicion at Alicia's obituary. So it consisted of 7 paragraphs that told the story that told only of a woman who disappeared from public view 40 years before. When I saw the obit in print the next day, I knew it didn't capture all she had been. I'd written of peace marches and protests she once participated in, songs written and so many million records sold, a daughter left behind. Events and statistics didn't describe the woman I'd met. Who was she really? I felt certain the answer would tell me why she'd been killed. A piece of the interview flashed through my mind, the part where she almost spoke about raising Kane. At the pinnacle of her recording career, what had caused her to quit? Had someone driven her out? Maybe the someone who came back to take her life? Again, I heard her ask if I had the courage to examine the past. Had she warned me that I'd be in danger if I dug into her past? That thought rankled, and my questions multiplied until the sum of them kept me awake all night. The next morning, I telephoned the Village Voice. I know you said the Kane story's dead, but I have a few ideas, I told Max. He laughed. Listen, Missy, I don't need you messing around with that. I want you to, no. That single word silenced him. Never before had I refused his instruction. I don't know how to explain it. I know I fought you about interviewing her, but some of the things she told me. I don't have time for this, Libby, and neither do you, he said. I'll make time. You won't. I'll squeeze it in between other things. Instead of putting an abrupt end to the conversation, Max hesitated. After a minute, he said, what have you got? Give me something specific. It's just a feeling. Something she said? His voice sounded strange. No, it's what she didn't say. He took a deep breath. It would be better to let it go, Libby. That stopped me. What he said, the way he said it, as though he were concerned I might get into something I couldn't get out of, wasn't like him. The man always wanted to get to the bottom of things. Max. Suspicious, I drew out his name. What do you know that I don't? He laughed. A lot of things, but about this, nothing. As I said, let it go. With those words, he hung up. Heels dug firmly onto my bedroom carpet. I muttered, damn if I won't find a way to chase this story. Max will change his mind when I drop a bombshell on his desk.
It's quite a book.
Yeah. I will tell you that although Libby wanted to be murder, she will find out as the story goes along that it isn't. Why it happened, what happened, that is one of the twists. And the story does twist and turn. In the book, you get a view of Libby's march down through first of all, you get a firsthand look at the riot at Pratt and how that occurred from her college classmate. From a friend who was there with her, you get a good view of the march in Thelma. From her bass player, you get a view of Alicia's life with the band and on the road. In the book are several songs that Alicia wrote, including As It Ends, a song that is precious to me because it's a lullaby that I wrote for my kids. And if you let me, I will see if I can find it quickly.
Can you sing it to us?
And then
I can try. You hear my voice. Tomorrow's today, when yesterday's gone. Sleep tight, my little one, here in my arms. Close your bright eyes and let sweet slumber come. Then like a butterfly, flit away home. Follow the butterfly home. Sleeps like a butterfly, gentle and brief, and the beauty you'll find there is beyond belief. Live in your nighttime adventure so sweet, then fly like a butterfly back home to me. Fly yourself back home to me.
very sweet. I have a feeling Cheryl has some questions for you.
Please.
So Libby, she started out kind of pursuing Alicia's story as part of her job, but then she almost had like a personal passion, almost a drive that she developed. It to me, that's how it seemed. And I just wondered what inspired you to create Libby and her passion for finding a missing person.
That is partly from a client I had when I practiced. He was a writer and always seemed to, he was doing some historical fiction and always had to, like a detective, dig into things. He had to learn what really happened. And As a matter of fact, some of the things that developed out of him just sit in the back of my head. In one of the Emlyn Good mystery books, my narrator, Emlyn, who's a direct descendant of Sarah Good, who was hanged as a witch in Salem, you may recall, she winds up solving a murder that happened back then. Well, a murder, a woman that was hanged. And she was set up because somebody wanted her apple orchard. So he called her a witch and had her hung, and he got the orchard. It's those kinds of things that drove me to develop Libby the way I did. But as you see, as the story goes on, Libby is digging into a lot more than just Alicia.
Yes. She is. And why did you choose New York City in the 60s and 70s? Now, I think you told us a little bit about it, but
I was there.
yeah.
I spent time in Greenwich Village, which was incredible. God. And Brooklyn, well, Pratt. That's where I went to school. I worked in Manhattan with the band. I was working in recording studios in Manhattan, which is why I could describe what this one looked like so well. It just fit. Manhattan is where Alicia's band would have had to be discovered, and to wind up starting their career as performers. So it had to be Manhattan. Brooklyn, well, my parents were from Brooklyn. I know the area. And in fact, it turns out that Alicia's grandfather lived in the house that really was my grandparents' house in Brooklyn. So these areas I knew well. And while I spent most of my writing time speaking about Niagara Falls and Western New York, Buffalo, there is some of that in this. But this was Alicia's life, her early life.
Thank you. And then Max Howard. So I didn't know if I liked him or hated him. What was his role in your mind when you wrote this?
God, it's funny. We had a fabulous review from Reader's Favorite. And the reviewer also wasn't sure that she liked Max Howard. He was really a lot like the senior editor that Ed Asner played, and that's where the character came into my mind. He was younger, of course, than that. Max was, but grouchy to an extent, overworked certainly, but I think there was a suggestion in what I read to you that Max knows something that he does not want to tell Libby, an important fact. And he's going to be grouchy and he's going to hide that from her as well as he can. At some point, they wind up closer as friends than just boss and junior reporter. But that takes time and it develops over the course of time. Max will also ease up after a while. And certainly once Libby learns the secret that throws her whole life upside down, it's going to be Max that's there to steady her.
Yeah, he was
Good subtle description.
I'm sorry?
A good subtle description.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wondered if anyone wanted to share their initial feelings about the character of Alicia, and did your view of her change from the beginning to the end of the book?
I have a couple of questions, but
Please.
it's not in
Not that
that.
one, okay.
Please.
Does anybody else want to answer? How did you get to Selma? You, Libby? How did you end up getting there?
I was, God, I drove down in a broken down Volkswagen. With,
I mean, mentally, how did you
Mentally?
get there?
that was the era. We had to, it wasn't just protesting against the war. It was so much. It was, if you will, the beginning of Black Lives Matter. It was the way Blacks were being treated then. When I learned about the march that Dr. King was down there, and the march that was going to take place, a few friends and I just we had to be there. It would have been wrong not to.
So you were under 20.
I was under 20. What was I at that point? 19 and a half.
The second question is,
Yeah.
or maybe it's just a statement. The funeral home was fascinating to me.
Okay.
And especially because it's Niagara Falls,
Uh-huh.
where they're notorious for other funeral homes that were different population of people,
Yeah.
but
And more crematorium.
yeah.
Yes, I know.
But that was such a descriptive, it was fascinating, the whole funeral.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that I learned, and is the phrase "show, don't tell," and that's something that I keep repeating to the writers in the Buffalo Writers Critique Group. My job, I believe, is for you to see what I'm seeing. I want you to hear what I'm hearing. If possible, I'd love you to smell what I'm smelling. So to just tell you, oh, it was a funeral home, and it's like, no, you need to see it. And I've tried to describe, everything that way. You'll have seen when they get to the recording studio, the very big description. You've seen the descriptions of Libby's house. There's even the description of riding the subway from Manhattan to Brooklyn. So this is something that, that I learned. And it's funny because a little bit more of my background, I moved up here in 1999. And I was introduced to the writers group, which was then just Buffalo Literary Center's writers group. And at the time when I first started attending the group, as my grandmother would have said, I thought I was a whole goddamn it. I had this first novel that I'd written. It was 180,000 words. I could hardly lift the binder. But I listened to the comments as I read pieces of it. And then not only the comments on my work, but the comments on everybody else's work. And I went home and I started making changes. Literally, come sit down. Literally, within 3 years, my first short stories were being picked up by literary journals online. Then a few print journals were picking them up. This is how, this is how it happened for me. And I continue to learn every day. I'm still a member of a different writers group It's a novel writers group. And these are all published authors. And they will always spot things that I don't see. And then I've got a fabulous editor who won't let me get away with a thing. If you read my book, Abigail's Window, I had done all of my research. I knew my ghosts period was the 1850s, 1860s. Her parents were fisher people on Lake Ontario. I did the research. I knew what fish were in Lake Ontario. Not in 1850, they weren't. My editor caught that. How did he find it? I don't know. This is what we do for each other, you know? What's your name, by the way?
Michelle, great.
Michelle, it's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Susan, I
just want to throw a comment in.
Please do.
You walked in there. Michelle reads a lot of books,
Huh?
and this might be exaggerated for the emotion of the moment, but you said it was the favorite book she's ever read.
Thank you.
It literally took me like 4 hours to read it.
Thank you so
shared the
much.
same thing with me on the way in.
Well, do an Amazon review.
Oh.
I love that.
My question was, first, kind of a couple of questions.
Hmm?
Why did you wait so long to put yourself into the book? And I've only read 2 books, but you definitely weren't in Abigail's Window if you're the character in this book, because
No.
they are very different
Yes.
women.
Yes.
And so why did you wait so long to put yourself into your own book?
God. I don't know. In terms of this book, how to phrase this? What happened in Chicago kept me from telling that story for a long, long time,
I see.
and I needed to get past it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard. So, yeah, it was easier to hide behind different characters. For in Abigail's Window, the ghost, Abigail, that book got written because the man I was working for, I was in-house counsel for him. He owned a bed and breakfast. Well, he owned several bed and breakfasts in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And one April, he asked me, Susan, St. Valentine's Day is coming up. He knew I was a writer. Can you write me a short story I can leave in the rooms for everybody? I said, sure. And so I started doing a little bit of research. And for some reason, well, the story developed because I was at the house one day to pick up some paperwork for him. And when I walked in, the innkeeper, she was standing holding onto the newel post at the bottom of the stairs, and she was positively pale. I said, what's the matter? She said, don't you hear that? I said, what? She said, the footsteps up there. I said, come on. This is a bed and breakfast. You've got guests. She said, Susan, you and I are the only ones here in the house. A lawyer, everything's got to have a logical explanation.
Yeah.
I went up the stairs, walked down the hall, opened the door of the room that the footsteps were coming from. I heard a sigh. I closed the door, walked downstairs. But that gave me the idea for the short story. And it started out as just a short story. And he put it in the room and people liked it. Wonderful. An online journal picked up the short story. My sister read it. She said, Susan, this has to be a novel. You've got to do it. I said, okay. And it took me, I think, 3 months, 4 months, and the novel got written. If you've read the book, there is a woman that is having a lot of difficulties in her life and is being haunted by a spirit that is not quite nice. And she's having difficulties with her relationships, and friends, 2 girlfriends, pull her up to Niagara-on-the-Lake for a girls-only weekend. Major snowstorm, they're stuck there. while they're in the house, Abigail reveals herself to Caitlin, who is the narrator. And the story unwinds as Abigail begins to tell Caitlin a bit about her life, but more than tell, because in the bedroom that Caitlin's staying in, Abigail sits her by the window. And strangely, as Abigail's talking through the window, Caitlin can see Abigail's life developing. There are twists in this, of course, a major twist at the end. I will tell you that in that book at the end, as in this book at the end, I got teary. That's how I tell myself, oh, this is a good book. So, that was also a book people said they couldn't put down.
I'm going to turn back to Shelley. What did you enjoy so much about the book?
Well, like you and I said, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I remember everything. So that, that part of it was amazing, but just little bits and pieces, you definitely, in my opinion, were very much affected by the March in Selma. And that theme, I think you carry throughout the book and how you deal with some of the characters. And there's even questions sometimes about, is that child or is that child not, or is that child belong to that person?
Mm-hmm.
So some people here know me. I had an interracial marriage for years. My husband passed away, so I can pick up on some of those things. And I don't know, there was just so many things I could relate to in the book, and I love mysteries. So.
Well, mysteries is something, of course, that I enjoy doing. I was explaining to Cheryl before. I just wanted to write fiction, contemporary fiction, real people. And I have a good friend and mentor, Gary Earl Ross, who was here a few months ago. And while I was in the writers group at at Just Buffalo, Gary was the moderator at that time. And one evening after the session, he and I were talking, and the conversation turned to mysteries, because Gary writes wonderful mysteries. And he said, well, you're a good writer. Why don't you write one? I said, Gary, I've tried. I can't plot one. And then Gary did the unthinkable. He dared me.
There you go.
I had a short story that had just been published in an online literary journal. And, it had Emlyn Good and the cat and the friend that she meets and how she learns that she was a direct descendant of Sarah Good. And I wait a second. I can make use of this. And literally, that became chapters, well, the first two chapters really, because there's a prologue, because I had to let everybody know that somebody's being murdered. But that became the first two chapters of the book. And it's funny, the way I've always written is I just sat there and told myself a story. And it just grew. It worked.
Do our online viewers have any questions? If you do, kindly unmute, or you can put them in the chat box. If I can figure out how to do this without Michaela here.
Michaela, where did you go hiding? Need to get a cough drop.
Well,
Doesn't look like it.
that doesn't look like it. Any other questions for Susan?
I have a quick, do you use the book Voices in My Head here?
I'm sorry?
The Voices in My Head?
That's my book of short stories.
Right.
I didn't bring that with me today, but you can get all of my books online. There are some, and you'll see in that book, that was the second of my books that Soltis Publishing published. But you'll see that the direction that I had initially intended to go, there are serious stories in there. One about the effects before people knew about PTSD, of a soldier that had served in World War I. One about parental mistreatment, shall we say, of a young girl. A number of those stories, and I'm proud of that book. And then the mysteries grew, and the magic of murder developed because Emlyn Good found out at 40 she's a director, and she's got Sarah Good's, what I call diary, which people know is a book of shadows. And so there's a lot in those books about Salem back in the 1690s and the people that lived there and what it looked like and what was going on. And Emlyn is using some things that she's reading to help Roger Fry, who was a neighbor and then a boyfriend as it develops, and then eventually her husband. He's a detective in Niagara Falls, and she's helping things she reads, gives her ideas that spring to clues that help him solve the crimes. That was the bulk of most of what I've written. There is another mystery that is a standalone, and it isn't a cozy, and you know what cozies are. They're clean mysteries. Mm-hmm. They're light, laughing in some places. There's one that isn't a cozy because there's a good sex scene in it. But that one developed because my editor and I, who's become a good friend, were having a conversation one evening, and he brought up where it came from. I don't know. He was talking to me about a past life experience that he had had. And I'm listening to him, and something clicked in my mind. Where I grew up in Queens, downstate, there was this old, rundown, yellow brick tenement. And if I walked past it on my way to school, if I was in the bus going past, if I drove, I went into a blind panic. I don't know why. Did something bad happen to me in a half-life? Who knows? But then a few weeks later, I was watching an episode of Mysteries of the Museum, and they had a segment about digging up a parking lot in Queens, and under the tar, they found old bones. I knew exactly where that parking lot was. It was no more than 2 blocks from that old building. Mm-hmm. And 2 things came together. Mm-hmm. And that's how that mystery developed. It's called What's Past is Prologue, a quote from Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And that was, I enjoyed it. My sister wants me to make a series out of it. Forget it. That was a one-off. But it's also set in Niagara Falls. And lo and behold, the narrator is a lawyer who came up from Long Island.
Amazing.
In my latest Emlyn Good book, The Cold in Niagara, as I said before, Burr, and outside, there are a couple of characters that live in what I call the Gettsville Senior Living Complex. It's actually a real senior living complex, but I moved from Williamsville to Gettsville because I really described it well, and I didn't want them to have the real place getting upset because I killed people there. But the characters that live there, and they are introduced in the Emlyn Good book. In this last Emlyn Good book, I just sent to my publisher my next book, which is called Death of a Chef. And those characters are the lead characters in that book. And I believe that may be the start of a new series. In fact, this morning I actually wrote the first 2 pages of the next book in that series. Not sure what it's going to be called yet, but it does take place during the solar eclipse.
You'll have to come back and share it with us, Susan. And we would love having you to come back again. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Cheryl, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Facilitating. Before we go, I just want to share that we're going to be meeting again on December 5th for a little bit different book. I know I'm going to struggle pronouncing this. Rocky Colavito. Pardon me?
Calavito.
Calavito,
Oh.
thank you.
He was a slugger for the Cleveland
You
Indians.
got
And
it,
he was
'cause
a
that's
fabulous hitter,
yes,
too.
Cleveland's iconic slugger. So that is on December 5th. And then we're going to have a book launch on the third Thursday of December. And that is written, it's an anthology. A number of authors whom we've known in the past have all contributed to a book. I believe the name of it is My Mother, and they each talk about their mother, some in very flattering ways and others in not so kind terms. So that should be very interesting too. So I hope you'll join us again. And Susan, thank you again for coming. And please get on our list for that next book, because
I
we'd love
will,
to
and-
have you back.
Mary Cheryl, thank you for having me. And everybody that's here, thank you, thank you. I'm glad you were able to put up with me. And the stutters that I had while I was trying to read. I
You're
can only hope
wonderful.
that you enjoyed the book.
Really did.
Very much so. Oh, I just want to say one other thing. I'm so glad that you sang the song you sang at the end and not the song that was early on in that book. So thank you for choosing the right song.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.